In this video we're going to have a go at disassembling this rear bumper from our 1975 280 SL. I can see these sections look to be quite rusty here, little holes in, little dent here. I don't know if any of this is going to be savable. These rear valances are still available. They're not super duper expensive. The expensive parts are these chrome bits here, which at first glance look okay, but you never know until you take the whole thing to pieces. So let's get on with that. Now, some of these nuts look pretty rusty. There's 6 on each side, 2, 4, 6. In fact, 7 if you include that one. And then there's going to be some screws to undo. So we're going to use this impact wrench here to see if we can get those undone. This bumper is really rusty, and every single one of these nuts is just turning. When the bumper is this rusted, I'm just twisting a spanner and twisting that out of that hole there, and then I'm going to peel this bumper off all the way. But I can see already that this is in a pretty bad way and there's not much left of it. As I peel that bumper off, this is not untypical of what you might find underneath a bumper, especially of a car that has been sitting outside. But as I mentioned, the expensive part is these chrome bits here. These valances we can replace without spending too much money, hopefully. Let's look on the bright side. This bumper rubber looks okay. I mean, obviously we have to get rid of some of the old rust out of there, but the actual hole fittings at the end are not split, so we should be able to use this bumper. We'll clean this up, get rid of any rust. We'll get a set of mole grips on the back of here, and then our impact driver to see if we can get those bolts out. Got that off eventually. That will go in a rust bath and clean up nicely. One on the other side came off with a washer, so I'll just have to check the picture and see if there's a washer there. So rusty that just broke off. In order to get these chrome pieces off here, we're going to need to take this chrome cover off. Now, that should be a coach bolt with a square fitting, but it's just turning, so I'm going to very carefully cut a slot in there with an angle grinder, and then hopefully we'll be able to get that bolt on there. On this side, that's just turning at the moment, so we'll cut that very carefully with an angle grinder, hold a screwdriver on there, and then get an impact wrench on the other side. Okay, one down. That should come off now, revealing that bolt, which we can now hold with a spanner while we turn the bolt on the other side. Now, this piece of chrome here is still held on with these 3 screws here. If you're extremely lucky, you may be able to get a ring spanner. That one seems to be coming loose. So many videos online showing you how to get nuts out, but basically once you've got it loose, don't try and wind it out in one go if it's as rusty as this, because you're likely to snap it off. Just go until it's tight, put another dab of penetrant in there, and then go back again. Eventually you may find it comes out without snapping. Sometimes you can cut a slot in the top of the bolt with an angle grinder and get it out with a screwdriver. You can also try hammering on a slightly smaller socket. That's a 9/32. The action of hammering that socket on sometimes breaks the rust loose. But I think we've got all 3 out now. Now that we've got those 3 screws off, we should in theory be able to take this off to reveal the horrors. Oh my lord, Rooney. The corrosion there is okay, but this here is not good. And we take that out. It hasn't come through to the other side yet. Maybe we'll be lucky. Maybe it looks worse than it actually is, but well, maybe we'll be okay. Just sand a little bit away there and see what we're left with. We might be able to save this piece here. That rust there, once we grind that off, is pretty deep, but we could always fill that with some kind of metal filler. But the other side hasn't bubbled through yet. Definitely won't be able to save these pieces here. They're just way too rusty, and you can see why they're bolts are spinning and just rusted completely. I think there's any point in trying to save this valance here. It's just too far gone. We might as well just use an angle grinder to cut these bolts here rather than trying to get them undone. They're completely seized, and that will allow us to take this section of the bumper bolt out. They all seem to have these wavy spring washers on them. I'm once going to have to check the diagram to see if that's correct or not. Normal order of events would be that you take this valance off first and it reveals a hidden bolt underneath here, but because this is so rusty anyway, we're just going to take this off. To get the valance off, it's screwed on with these screws here, but I don't know how well you can see this, but these screws are so rusted that the chance of getting them out is zero. All of these screws out, apart from this one, which is rusted in there solid, so I'm gonna bang it with a hammer, bang an 8mm socket over there with a hammer. Sometimes that knocking actually loosens it, and then I'm going to see if that's just too rounded, so I'm going to go to a 9/16. The 8mm didn't work, but the 5/16, banging it on there with a hammer seems to have got that loose, and that's almost all we need to do to get this last bit of chrome off. Really struggling to get this bolt out, even having cut a groove in there and trying to hold it with a screwdriver. But sometimes you might be able to wiggle one of these out, because you can see that it does just slide in. So we're going to try just the wiggling method and see if we can slide that out. Money against it, but amazingly enough, all these valance screws are coming out by banging on that 5/16 socket. Here's the last one. As I say, amazingly enough, all of those screws have come out. Still struggling to get this out. Now, if you had a welder, you'd just weld a nut on top of there and then just get it out that way, but I don't have a welder. That wasn't coming out at all, so we went for plan B, which is basically just to take the screws out and then to bash the corner of that out, so that will slide out, and that will probably allow us to get a spanner in there, and then take that piece out, and then that should be, in fact, that should be then loose enough, hopefully, to get some more grips on that to hold it. Isn't too bad. We'll be able to refurbish that. But it is almost worth taking the back bumper off and checking that it's not too far gone, and if it is, rust encapsulating the back of it, because once that bubbles through, then it's impossible to fix. Just tap that out, and now the moment of truth is to look at the back of it. Let's have a look and see how this looks on the back. There's some signs of corrosion, and if we left it like that, that would all turn to corrosion, but this is actually perfectly usable. This will clean up nicely and look really nice on the car. Last thing we have to do is separate this lower valance. Let's see how many of these little screws we can get out by bashing them in with the 5/16 socket and putting some penetrating oil on there. These last two, we had to use an angle grinder to get those out. Hopefully I can get a mole wrench on the leftovers, and we'll have a look at this bit and see if we can use it. This bit I think we've just got to replace. Once again, this I'm going to very carefully cut that bolt there without damaging the chrome. There we go, we got that bit off. These little pieces are quite expensive, so if you can save them, then it's a good idea to do so. This might be okay if we sandblast this and powder coat it. I think that might just be okay. We've disassembled the rear bumper. These stiffeners here look a lot worse than they actually are. Once we turn these off to the sandblasters and powder coaters, they'll come back like new. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the lower valance itself. The only thing we could see that was wrong with it when it was still attached to the bumper was this here, which I was thinking, oh, we could just repaint that. But once you've taken it off, you can see that this whole channel on all of these pieces here is just completely corroded. Unfortunately, the design of these is a moisture trap, and we'll have to get new ones of those, prime them, and then paint them up. Now I want to show you on my 280 SL. This car I've had, well, not since new. It's my first ever car. I didn't buy it when it was new, but I've had it for many, many years. And when you look at a car like this, if you were thinking of buying a car, you might take a cursory glance at the bumper like this and think, yep, that's absolutely fine. But I'm going to show you what the underside of this bumper looks like. Okay, we're underneath the car now, and if you look closely here, you can see the first signs, and a little bit further on, obviously, this lower valance here. When we take this bumper to pieces on this car eventually, you can see that this is all going to be pretty knackered. Even the stuff up here, unless that's been replaced at some stage in its life, you can bet your bottom dollar that if it's rusty here, it's going to be rusty on the other side. So if you are thinking of buying an SL, or indeed you've got an SL, have a look underneath your bumper for signs of rust, because if it's not too bad, you might be able to save the chrome. These valances are readily available, but the chromes, they're also available, but they're very expensive.